Hey Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. It really means a lot to me. Look, I've been thinking about this. I think I'm going to go in depth on a podcast on this because it's that important. But what does it take to actually run a successful site? And this inspired me because of, I'm not going to lie, the CVS getting out of clinical research. Last year during COVID, everyone was so excited about CVS getting into clinical research. And just yesterday or last week, they announced that they're not. And it got me thinking, us smaller sites, we're actually more capable of producing efficient sites than the big ones because we have incentives to do so. These big Fortune 500 companies, it's not worth it to them to have an efficient site. They want volume. Well, to run an efficient site where you're not necessarily relying on volume, you don't want to rely on volume as a small site. You want to rely on diversity of studies. You want to rely on multiple streams of revenue because these studies are getting more complex. So what does that mean? That means you need a business development so my company can help. It's a low monthly fee. Inato is a sponsor of the show. Link underneath. That's free. You've got clinicaltrials.gov. You've got LinkedIn. You need to focus on business development. You need to constantly bring in new studies, more trials, and somebody at your site needs to do this, whether it's the site director, the lead CRC. Somebody's got to focus at least 20% of their time on this. At Yuma Clinical Trials, that person is me. I don't delegate that to a coordinator. At one point I will. I'll probably just have a full-time biz dev person because there's a little added duty for business development, and it's called community outreach, where you go out and you find other clinicians that want to work in clinical research. And MedVector, they're currently not a sponsor of this show, but it's a technology I'm starting to play with. MedVector is going to allow me to reach clinicians, and it's kind of going to allow me to Trojan horse my way into their offices and say, hey, you know what? I could provide you immediate revenue with the patients not even having to leave your site, your office. And if you like research, we can end up working together as PIs, sub-Is. This diversity of different trials, you don't want to rely on just one area of research history of your site. There are sites that do that. I used to do that. Southwest Clinical Trials, my first site. It was CNS. That's all we did. And we did well, but we definitely had ups and downs because every therapeutic area goes through ups and downs. So I'm doing it differently this time. I'm trying to get diversity. So I have internal medicine, I have a dermatologist, I've got a psychiatrist. The next thing is organization. You've got to find your coordinators have to keep themselves organized because if you're doing your job right as biz dev, you're going to start getting studies. And then if you partner with the right physicians, you're going to start getting patients. So how do you handle the actual workflow? And this is probably the most challenging part, believe it or not, is getting the coordinators trained. I put all of mine through the CRC Academy, link underneath. I, as the site director, am there. The other day I entered data in the EDC after we screened a patient. I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. You can't be afraid to get your hands dirty while you're building your systems until you hire a site director or you promote one of your CRCs to be a site director. But I think having a process in place, yes, you need your SOPs, but forget about that. Don't just do that to check a box. You need an actual system almost for every study. Every study is different. Every study has its own nuances. You need like a system for every study and for every visit. Who's going to do what? If this person doesn't show up, who's backing them up? Somebody's always got to be responsible for certain tasks. So that's what I'm doing as the site director. I'm making sure we're developing these systems internally using technologies like two sponsors of this show, Creo, which is eSource and eReg. Love it. Okay, regulatory, we're going to talk about it later. I'm actually going to release a video later this week or next week, 20 minutes on investigator site files. So enjoy, guys. But for right now, Creo, we use it for eSource, and you can create the source however you want, just like you can do on paper. But what I like about eSource is you can see it happening, like on your screen. You don't need to be scrambling for papers and looking for stuff, and you can also delegate more effectively. Instead of going to hand somebody a paper, you just say, hey, that's your assessment to do in Creo. Like our site, we have a sub-I, we have a PI, they have assessments they need to do. We have coordinators for whatever studies that they're responsible for. They have certain assessments they need to do. They also have backups, and you can modify this source so you can put it in any order you want, and you can make it simpler for yourself. You can essentially streamline. So it makes life easier as a coordinator, in my opinion, to use eSource. Not to mention it's cleaner. Then you got to keep your team organized with everything. What's the IRT portal and link? What's the IRB portal and link? What's the latest informed consent? How do we know for a fact that this is the most recent informed consent? How do we know for a fact this is the most recent protocol? Where's the EDC? How do we log into the ePros? This is where Versatrel comes in. Another sponsor of the show, and Versatrel helps keep sites organized. That's free, absolutely free. There's no reason why any site should not be using Versatrel. So Inato's free. Creo, you got to pay for, but it's worth it. My service, especially if you're a newer site, you got to pay for, but it's worth it. I created it for myself. Versatrel, free. Everyone's got to use it. MedVector, free. I'm going to start using it soon. I'm already putting the plans in place to get this business development and community outreach going. Because if you do the biz dev right, it's not just getting studies, it's getting community clinicians in your area. You're doing the screening right as well. And you even got to streamline that process further. Who's doing the pre-screenings? Who's calling the patients? Right now, we're a startup. I'm involved in that aspect as well. I need to make sure our calendars are booked and we're not just sitting around waiting for patients to call. That's another thing I should have thrown in there. So there's so much going on to run a site effectively. It's no wonder CVS couldn't do it properly. It's not just about access to the patients. It's not just about identifying the patients. Somebody's got to talk to the patients. You got to be a human being. And that's where a lot of these big corporations fail. They don't have enough people. Yes, they have human beings working for them, but those human beings' incentives are not aligned with what the site's objective should be, as opposed to a small site like UMcClellan Trails. If my coordinators are busy entering data or screening patients, who's going to do the biz dev? Who's going to pre-screen the next patient? Who's going to look for the next physician? That's me. The buck stops with me and with my business partner, Jaime Valles. So that's, in a nutshell, how to run a site effectively. We're not even going to get into budgets, contracts. My company, DSCS Help Site, we negotiate all your contracts for you. There's no other fee other than our monthly fee. Tracking invoices, tracking receivables, which Creo also does well. I use Creo for that. It has a built-in CTMS. Study forecasting. Use technologies, guys. It's 2023. The fundamentals of running a research site haven't changed since 2005, but it's actually gotten easier to do it because of technologies. So hopefully this helps just give you a glimpse into what it takes to run an effective site. At the end of the day, it's not complicated, but there's a lot of moving parts. And we are B2B, meaning business to business companies, because we deal with CROs and sponsors. But we are also B2C companies, business to consumer, because we're dealing with and serving patients in the community. So in a nutshell, this is, in my opinion, what it takes to run an effective site. It might not be in the best interest of a Fortune 500 have the same thesis. We didn't even talk about quality assurance and making sure that the protocols being followed, GCPs being followed, your SOPs are being followed, and that the monitors are happy. So at the end of the day, you've got several stakeholders to keep happy as a site owner. You've got your employees, you've got patients, you've got sponsors and CROs, which includes, right, that includes keeping the monitors happy. And then you've got the clinicians that you're reaching out to and working with and partnering in your community. Let me know what you guys think about this. It's no wonder the big Fortune 500s can't seem to make it work. Like, subscribe, comment, share, Guru Nation. Never been a better time to get into research.